Let's get to it. Let's get to it. All right, here we go. Boom. Yo, what the fuck is going on? Are we really blinded by this mirage of propaganda? Do we really not see that the system has us going against each other and fighting back and forth while they control us like puppets? Do we not see that we're in a state of no peace? But to have peace is to have understanding, and the understanding we seek seems so far away in a society so divided. We no longer need a colonizer to do the work of a colonizer, tearing each other down, discrediting each other's historical struggle, causing psychological and physical warfare. Like that doesn't fall right into the hands of the man that created the system we've assimilated so perfectly into? I refuse. I refuse to participate, understanding that we were all products of survival in a race of world domination and global power. But the hardest thing to admit is that we were victims and we are products of survival. And understanding that struggle is what unifies us. But somehow the conversations are all around who's black, who's not, who's Latino, who's not, who's native, who's not, whose land, your land, my land, her land, but no plan? God damn. This shit sounds like a scam to distract us from the plan at hand, planned by the man who created the system we've assimilated into. So are we really far off from where they want us to be? Fighting and bickering like it's the new TV for public consumption of the destruction of the oppressed? Really? We've allowed this dark cloud to consume us, a full eclipse. It's like Moondog Punisher snatched the sun and blew it out with a kiss, leaving us in capital punishment's grip, the devil's pit, the land of chaos, self-destruction, and no peace. Never forget. What's going on, everybody? What's going on? Welcome back. Welcome back. Dan, can I get some taps? Can I get some likes? Tap that screen, share this live. Welcome back to the AfroTaino Book Club. We are continuing off with the Huey P. Newton Reader. We got about 2.5 hours left. Salute to everybody participating. Let's get the likes up there. Let's get the likes up here. If this is your first time here, I do believe in socialism, free education, free housing, free healthcare. So by tapping the screen and sharing this live, it's just showing me a little bit of socialist love and support to be able to get the message out to the masses. And I want to play one more joint before we start off. This is from my brother Manny. He's been working on this. This is a fire one right here. Tap that screen, tap that screen, tap that screen.
I'm a Puerto Rican from the diaspora. I want to see my island free, not now, but I order. My name rings bells from here to Yabacoa. I'm from Cleveland where it gets colder than Minnesota. This ain't no novella, my life is like a movie. I'm a revolutionary like my brother Subi. We do this for la patria, race against la máquina. Guns sound like reggaeton, the way it be like rakata. It's Manny Che, I'm here to stay. When it comes to my people, I don't play. From day to night, night to day. It's in my veins, I got the blood of a slave. We freedom fighting all the way to the grave. I'm a young lord, Balante it's a slogan. Even a blind man can see that I am chosen. You can hate, but you will never ever stop my motion.
Ooh, my boy got some heat right there. He got some heat.
That's the farthest from the truth. They don't have no clue. Tony Hicklin, fuck you. Fuck you too if you believe that dumb shit. God sent me here to put the matrix in a glitch. Standing on the mound, I ain't giving up no hits. Leader of my team, no hitters when I pitch. And when I'm up the bat, guarantee I will not miss. Like number 21, I was born for this shit. Oír tu voz, sentir tu amor. Desde hace tiempo espero yo que así soñar que estás aquí. Screaming free Puerto Rock, that shit'll never stop. Screaming free Puerto Rock, till my casket drop. The revolution now, you either ready or you not. I'm running to the front line.
Welcome, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome.
It's time to free our people from from these chains and these locks. Time to free our minds and stop thinking in a box. You with us or against us, if you not, then you ops. Uncle Sam and my Theo, he gon' go home. Take Luma with you, leave us alone. Get the fuck out and don't come back. And take Mr. Jones cause he don't know how to act. Fuck Jake Paul, you could run and tell that. He's only on an island so he don't pay tax. We done being colonized, that's just facts. You part of the problem if you think I should relax. Woo!
Salute everybody, welcome back again. This is the AfroTaino book club. We are picking up where we left off with the Huey P Newton reader. We got about 2 hours and a half, so I want to be able to get through as much of it as possible. Between my trip to Puerto Rico and a couple of things I've been doing, this book has been dragged out, so I want to finish it out so that way we can get on a new project. The last 2 weeks I was put on timeout because of a couple of chapters. So if you guys could do me a favor, just keep tapping that screen, sharing this live, keep it a safe and secure live, so that way we could be able to get this content out to the masses. Again, this is the Huey P Newton reader. So I want to get right into it. If you guys could do me a favor, let's get up to 1,000 likes. If you guys could hit that goal for me, let's get started, locked and loaded, and let's continue.
Eve, the mother of all living.
Tap that screen, y'all.
1974. The psychobiologist Mary Jane Sherfray made 2 startling discoveries in the mid-1950s. The first was that biological research had clear evidence that life in the uterus begins as female. The fetus was defined by a rudimentary phallus. The surpassing irony of Dr. Sherfray's discovery was that this elemental fact had been totally ignored, or rather repressed, by biology, as it existed under the spell of the male bias. And that is the second discovery. The 2 discoveries are of equal importance. To begin with, that life begins female, and second, that science has repressed and suppressed this 20th century heresy. During the period of pre-science, the assumption had been, predictably, that life began as male, and that a castrated or deformed fetus was born as a female. This atavistic belief was eventually replaced by the idea that life began as a neuter with sex differentiations arriving at a later stage of intrauterine development. This scientific-sounding proposition gave way under the weight of modern research data, but the new discovery was ignored. This incredible gap in the scientific dialogue can have only one explanation: that Adam came out of Eve, and not the reverse, as we have been taught for millennia. The fairy tale of Genesis is taken lightly at our peril, as Miss Sherfray and lately the women's liberation movement have told us. But the conflict between appearance and reality is perhaps more profound than even the women's movement has argued. The first principle of nature itself seems to be female. Genesis is a startling testament to man's realization of that basic identity. In Genesis, we see the ancient Mother Nature co-opted by a patriarchal, super-masculine beard of a god. The trauma of female primacy is further denied by making the woman, Eve, a mere extension of the man, Adam, and the issue of his body. The early gens and tribes, as far as we can tell, were primarily matriarchal and matrilocal, or at the least avuncular, with the mother's brother as the power. All of the earliest mythology is univocal in the identification of creativity, power, and primacy with the female. Mother Nature and Mother Earth are the universal models for all creation, human and metaphysical. But by the time of writing the Bible, woman had suffered her world historical defeat, and man's revenge appears complete. It is my argument that women were socially supreme as long as the size of population groups was relatively small. Man was ignorant of his role in procreation, and so worshipped women and the impenetrable process of birth and renewal that she acted out. The seed, he thought, came from the rain and the wind. This set of fantasies was bound to lead to a slave-like mentality in the man that, Combined with his socially inferior status in the gens, snake-like caused him to plot his rebellion and revenge against women and nature itself. A revenge he is still exacting. Behind the iron reaction formation of the myth of Genesis stands a much older sensuous myth that enshrines women as the center of creation. Modern chromosomal research echoes the old story of parthenogenesis. 20 million years ago, at the dawn of the Pleistocene, there must have existed a basic ambiguity about the process of fertilization. A remnant of this theory of procreation can be seen in Genesis. The Hebrew word ladat means both knowledge and sexuality in its broadest sense. The tree of knowledge is a transitional symbol, looking backward to a time when men were not absolutely necessary for the creation of life. Simultaneously, the tree is a maddening symbol of power that men must possess if they are to control the mysterious female. Thus, men must destroy the garden and the tree in order to make woman totally dependent on him and his seed. This reverses the power relationship at one stroke. But the existential and race memories of the female paradise, where man was a parasitic non-entity, throbbed then, as they do now, like unhealed wounds. In those days there were giants, Genesis says. No doubt, but by the time of Genesis, the sex of the giants had been changed, and the sacred fruit that reminded men of their eternal biological androgyny was declared forever taboo. The female could be best overthrown during pregnancy or just after childbirth. When man discovered his role in procreation, he could then attempt indirect coercion by the constant impregnation of the woman and direct control by the seizure of those goods and symbols that stood for power. Woman was slowly imprisoned in the very biology that had made her supreme. She bore her fruit in pain, and she became a slave to the now physically superior male, just as earlier he had been her vassal under the spell of her fecundity. Men moved swiftly to the necessary dehumanizing of women. She was the snake and the devil, the unclean and the freak of nature, all the identities that man had labored under in a universe that was female in principle. No wound to man's vanity was too small for restitution. Genesis would be hilarious if it were not such frightening evidence of the historical male rage. Once man was physically and mythologically compensated for his former humiliation, he had to force on women a slave mentality and erase forever any intimations of her former glory. Since the man's exposed and erectile tissue could not naturally gratify or answer the complex inner organism of the woman, she had to be desexualized. The age-old whore Madonna strategy was the crude answer.
Yeah, F1 in the comments. Again, this is for educational purposes only. This is in the Huey P. Newton Reader, so do me a favor to protect the live. Just tap the screen and keep the F1s locked and loaded. I just got off of being on timeout with TikTok, so just do me a favor, help and support by tapping the screen and sharing this live.
Stinging reminder of female superiority that was before his eyes every day. She was always ready and therefore potent, while he, with his exposed genitalia, was always potentially impotent, and his impotence or inadequacy was called forth precisely by her biological readiness at almost any age. So man, who could not give birth, began to invent everything else. His brain children were all made possible by the art of writing. The exclusion of women from that process meant that she dropped below the level of history to live like an animal in a perpetual drudgery and blows. The masculine protest suffered by women corresponds in many ways to the agony of black people since the Renaissance. Now the tables seem to be turning. Modern technology gives women the upper hand once again. She does not need man as a father or a provider or even necessarily as a lover, since her demands for orgasm have created a new epidemic of impotence. Her psychological armor is less paralyzing than that of the fearful male. He must constantly prove his adequacy. In the era of doomsday weapons, his war-loving, chauvinistic, sexist male protests of power have become the scandal of history. Man, who cannot give life, has begun to take it by the billions in our century. He has revenged himself by desecrating Mother Nature and polluting Mother Earth. The historical defeat of woman came by violence. That must be admitted now. It is only natural, then, that there should be a burning component of violence in the women's movement. The war between the sexes is just that. Black liberation has something to say to women on the score of revolution and rebellion. The first thing to understand is that black men are enslaved by the white man, just as the white and black women have been. It is therefore futile to try to make black men the enemy of black women, futile and counter-revolutionary. The aim of some women to replace men mechanically as the master simply posits another inferior order, men once again. The natural superiority of women does not give them any social superiority in this age of technology. They must fight for power with their natural allies, all those who are oppressed by our system of chauvinistic exploitation. Men, except for a handful, are merely women to the ruling circle, cannon fodder, taxable objects, cogs in a wheel. It is human liberation that makes a dialectic with every suffering member of the mass of humankind. There is simply not enough power to go around. So men will fight women in the way that whites fight blacks. Women's liberation must transcend the scarcity principle under which it has been operating, must make common cause against the ancient snake of anti-natural tyranny, in the House, certainly, but finally in the White House and other palaces of the West. And the paradigm for it all began in the Garden of Eden, or rather, the Olduvai Gorge in Africa.
That was a short chapter. Salute to everybody tapping in. Don't forget, everyone, we are live on YouTube as well. So if you guys want to go catch up with some of the previous chapters that you guys missed out, or you want to catch this one if you can't stay full through, do me a favor, go check out AfroTaino 88 on YouTube. You can catch all the prior live. Just make sure you check the live section, because it's not in the video section, because it's in the live cat since it's a live video, right? But keep tapping that screen. If this is your first time here, I do believe in socialism, free education, free housing, and free healthcare. So by tapping the screen and sharing this live, it's just showing me a little bit of socialist love and support to be able to get the message out to the masses. But let's get right into the next chapter. Without further ado, let's get it.
The Mind is Flesh, 1974. The overthrow of the Cartesian concept of mind is a fast-fading victory laurel. A dialectical analysis of mind, by definition, must subsume the seminal 19th century scientific breakthroughs in biology, anthropology, psychology, and epistemology. Dialectics must reach forward, building on this science and its philosophies, as represented by existentialism, psychoanalysis, learning theory, and historical materialism. Only dialectics can verify Soren Kierkegaard's memorable theorem that the mind is flesh. And we would add...
And really quick, TikTok, this is not a beer. It's just a soda. Really quick, before they put me on timeout again.
This flesh both evolved and functions in an environment that is modified and partially created by the history and presence of the mind. Therefore, to change the environment is to change the mind at the phenomenal level. Gilbert Ryle, in his book The Concept of Mind, provides a demystification of the mind as the Age of Enlightenment conceived it, the mind as spirit. The official doctrine, which hails chiefly from Descartes, goes something like this. With the doubtful exceptions of idiots and infants in arms, every human being has both a body and a mind. Some would prefer to say that every human being is both a body and a mind. His body and his mind are ordinarily harnessed together, but after the death of the body, his mind may continue to exist and function. Human bodies exist in space and are subject to the mechanical laws that govern all other bodies in space. Bodily processes and states can be inspected by external observers, so a man's bodily life is as much a public affair as are the lives of animals and reptiles, and even the careers of trees, crystals, and planets. But minds do not exist in space, nor are their operations subject to mechanical laws. The workings of our minds are not witnessable by other observers. Their careers are private. Only I can take direct cognizance of the states and processes of my own mind. A person therefore lives through two collateral histories, one consisting of what happens in and to his body, the other consisting of what happens in and to his mind. The first is public, the second private. The events in the first history are events in the physical world. Those in the second are events in the mental world. It is customary for man to express this bifurcation of his two lives and of his two worlds by saying that the things and events that belong to the physical world, including his own body, are external, whereas the workings of his own mind are internal. This antithesis of outer and inner is of course meant to be construed as a metaphor, since minds, not being in space, could not be described as being spatially inside anything else, or as having things going on spatially inside themselves. But lapses from this good intention are common, and theorists are found speculating how stimuli, the physical sources of which are yards or miles outside people's skin, can generate mental responses inside their skulls, or how decisions framed inside their craniums can set into motion their extremities. Underlying this partly metaphorical representation of the bifurcation of a person's two lives, there is a seemingly more profound and philosophical assumption. It is assumed that there are two different kinds of existence, or status. What exists or happens may have the status of physical existence, or it may have the status of mental existence. There is thus a polar opposition between mind and matter, an opposition that is often brought out as follows. Material objects are situated in a common field known as space, and what happens to one body in one part of space is mechanically connected with what happens to other bodies in other parts of space. But mental happenings occur in insulated fields known as minds, and there is, apart maybe from telepathy, no direct causal connection between what happens in one mind and what happens in another. Only through the medium of the public physical world can the mind of one person make a difference to the mind of another. The mind is its own place, and in his inner life, each of us lives the life of a ghostly Robinson Crusoe. People can see, hear, and jolt one another's bodies, but they are irremediably blind and deaf to the workings of another's minds and inoperative upon them. The consensus of Western science is, of course, that the mind is the brain. Variations on this theme represent various competing schools of psychology and psychobiology. All of this, however, dialectical materialism subsumes and then sets itself against. The dialectical approach tries to distinguish at once between the brain and the mind, to take the quotation marks provisionally off of the construct mind. The argument concerning inherent versus environmental phenomena in the mind-brain is at least as old as Socrates. Dialectics, of course, considers this but one more tautology or false argument. There is an article by the great biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky in the 1960 volume 100 Jahre Evolutionsforschung, to the effect that the theory of preformation in evolution, which amounts to denying evolution in favor of a purely endogenous unfolding predetermined once and for all, is irrefutable in principle, and that all one can do with it is show where it is useless. But if one attaches any importance at all to the influence of environment, even by means of some purely structural selection, it becomes very hard to view as deducible the sort of evolutionary history that then emerges. Of course, he makes it clear that environmental influence is exerted by means of selection, although this selection never becomes operational except at some precise moment and has no foreknowledge of the future. But the genes, according to him, act rather like the members of an orchestra, not like soloists, so that, as he has emphasized elsewhere, American Naturalist, November through December 1956, selection operates not upon separate characteristics, but upon overall reactions, both of the polygenic kind, concurrent action of the genes, and the pleitropic kind, modification of a single gene with repercussions on two or more characteristics. What decides success or failure is, moreover, not only the final phenotypic state reached, but all the stages along the line. On the other hand, variability is due not simply to mutations, but, above all, to genetic recombinations. It will be remembered that Dobzhansky originated the hypothesis of balance, 1955, according to which the adaptive norm is an arrangement of a number of genotypes, multiple heterozygotes predominating. The vital factor is then seen to be the internal equilibrium of the genetic pool with what Lerner has called the genetic homeostasia. The important part played by equilibrium is stressed as much by Whalen, 1957, and others by Dobzhansky and Spassky in their classic experiment. Jean Piaget and Erik Erikson have given us models of a genetic agenda that suggest a philosophy of mind-brain-body, trust, creativity, generativity, joy, and their opposites, depending on the environment of the ego. It is well to recall here Freud's little remembered dictum. When I say ego, I mean the body ego. What are the parameters of the discussion of the mind? Dialectics argues a spatial reference, intercommunalism, the plasticity of the ego, the racial potential to overcome alienation at all orders of abstraction. Temporarily, we argue the historical materialism of the species, that the mind-brain-body evolved in tandem, coeval, and concomitant. The apes, after 2.5 million generations, lived their lives much the same as did their earliest ancestors. They remained stooped, languageless, cultureless, static, but they were loving and generally peaceful. Then a remarkable thing happened. Out of one of their lines, man was born. And though basically loving, he has become the only known creature massively destructive of his own kind. By contrast with the apes, men have accumulated all that our distinctive minds have learned in 3% as many generations, for man was born only 80,000 generations ago. Almost everything known as civilization has been devised by the most recent 0.5% of man's generations. For example, agriculture and the possibility of living in settled communities were invented only 500 generations ago. Recorded history is only 200 generations old. The Golden Age of Greece lived but 100 generations ago. The entire span of the scientific era is encompassed by the last 20 generations. The mind of man has been subjected to his own scientific study for only the last 3 generations. The era of nuclear power is only a little more than 1 generation old. The awareness of the possibility of universal abundance is less than 1 generation old.
I just want to throw it out there. He wrote this in 1974. All right? 1974.
That we have come so far in the human agenda in so few reproductive cycles, particularly in the last 20, and especially in the last 3, makes the only emotional posture appropriate to a human being one of considered confidence. Another way to grasp the dimension of man's achievement is to imagine its 2 million years compressed into a single lifetime of, say, 50 years.
Right.
After shivering through darkness into middle-aged adulthood at the age of 37, men fully tamed fire. Only after 49 3/4 years of wandering as hunters did they settle down to till the ground, harvest crops, domesticate animals, weave rough cloth. 6 weeks ago, some men invented writing. 3 weeks ago, the Greek carried literature, art, and philosophy to a pinnacle that set standards for the succeeding weeks. They also devised political democracy for the minority who were free citizens. And Hippocrates laid the foundation for the ethical practice of clinical medicine. 18 days ago, Jesus was born and died, and the people of what is now Vietnam began their continuing struggle against invaders. 5 days ago, the printing press was invented, and Vesalius did his pioneering human dissections. A day and a half later, Shakespeare sent his winged warriors across linguistic and temporal boundaries, and Harvey discovered the circulation of the blood. 36 hours ago, Jenner introduced vaccination for smallpox, and the United States became an independent nation dedicated to the extension of democracy, whose people were expected to understand and express their judgment about all matters affecting their mutual future. On the same day, the steam engine was invented, Pinnell unchained the mental patients, and for the most part, men stopped eviscerating in public those who had new ideas of government, or hanging old women accused of traffic with the devil. Late yesterday afternoon, steamships and railroad trains began hastening about the globe, and Lister introduced antisepsis. This morning, Freud launched his daring expedition to the lost inner continent of the unconscious, and the magic of electricity was tamed. At noon today, men learned to sail beneath the waves and through the air. Also around lunchtime, a great war was fought to make the world safe for democracy. 6 hours ago, Fleming discovered penicillin, and another great war was fought, this one to save democracy for the world. Shortly thereafter, the atom and hydrogen bombs were born. 5 hours ago, the television industry was born. 3.5 hours ago, the war in Korea ended. Americans began to replace the French in Vietnam, and Salk introduced immunization against polio. Less than 90 minutes ago, the nuclear test ban treaty was signed, and President Kennedy was murdered. Half an hour ago, 2 astronauts from opposite sides of the Earth took astonishing walks in space. We were reminded how tenuous is our mastery of even commonplace technology when half an hour earlier, the lights mysteriously went out over the eastern end of the country. And less than a quarter of an hour ago, before most of us watching at home had become aware that our pollutions might destroy our life on Earth, 2 of us celebrated our 51st birthday on the moon. All of civilization spans only 0.5% of man's existence. Is this flicker of time a fair trial of so brave an effort? The attempt must be made to find the balance, the dialectic and analytic relationships between various orders of abstraction inherent in the mind-brain-body process. The operative word is process, and it is the dynamic of process that distinguishes dialectic from traditional methods of analysis. Concrete examples are called for at this point in the argument. A great deal is made of the distinctions between personal and race memory as functions of the mind-brain, to which we will add body. The terrible anxiety concerning survival in the 20th century has focused to the genius of science, philosophy, and literature on the mind, or the brain, of humankind. Not surprisingly, it is the existential novelists, Sartre, Camus, Moravia, and so on, who attempt to make the leap over the abyss, created by the science of the last century, that separates brain and mind. Their leap is the beginning of a bridge. The bridge is the human body. The body is animated by the time lag between the world and the nervous system. Thus, everything is memory as we know phenomena. There is no such thing as was, only...
Ooh, that was a question. They asked, so one of the comments asked, do I believe in Jesus? I don't subject myself to any organized religion. I do believe a lot of the biblical books do have bits of historical content, right? I do think it's saturated with a bunch of other stuff that people put in there. But I do believe he was, if you ask me, my opinion of who he was, I see Jesus like Pedro Albizu Campos, like a Malcolm X, like a Martin Luther King. He went into the what the church is, fought against the injustices, was crucified for it. Like, I believe that's who he was. He was a revolutionary of his time. I don't know about the mystical stories behind it and all of that. Like, I'm not too sure. I do believe in spirituality, so hey, maybe shit happened. But I don't know about what they wrote in the book. That's just my perception. No shade at nobody else. I don't knock nobody. I'm not against anybody's beliefs or faith. I just don't subject myself to any organized religion. And to be honest, any organized anything, because nowadays indoctrination is crazy.
If was existed, there would be no grief or sorrow. Faulkner's reading, with italics applied for emphasis of the vicissitudes of memory, is magisterial. Memory makes men sick. Repression of memory makes men sick. Yet, to be well, the sufferer must remember both more and less. This is his psychotherapy. In some primitive clans, when a child is born, a wooden image is buried in a certain place. This is the chiringa, the soul. The chiringa that will always be there as a fixed locus of identity surrounded and guaranteed by the earth itself. That is the genesis of the religious identity, religio in the sense of tying back, that is rooted in earth and soil. Now men are deracinated, denatured, uprooted forever, their souls floating and blown about in the endless wind of history, and any cure that cannot minister to this irremediable hurt is nothing more than a straw in that wind. So the soul looks endlessly for its chiringa. Where can I find my home? Asks Nietzsche on his mantic wanderings. Now we all ask that. One of our failed strategies is, always and everywhere, nostalgia, from nostos, homegoing. But we cannot go home for two reasons. Was does not exist anymore, nor did it ever exist as we choose to remember it. In fact, we construct this former home out of our own awareness of loss and nothingness, or we project it forward into a heaven. One day is enough might have been a motto that modern existentialists have borrowed from one of their mentors, Dostoevsky. But these big themes of time and inner space flow down this century from a matrix that includes psychoanalysis, existentialism, and dialectical materialism, however hard they try to be opposites of each other. After Freud, the unconscious equaled timelessness. One day is enough if only the body could be cauterized of all its secret calls. What are the laws and logic, as Camus called them, of the body? When Freud spoke of the I, ego, he said, of the body I, while Moravia and the others, for their part, seemed to be writing of the body's memory. What else could they mean? Certainly there is no such thing as the memory's memory. What but the body can be meant, for what but the body could be the instrumentality of that all-embracing impulse to go home? The body craves again those never-to-be recaptured caresses and states of childhood, but it also translates into fantasy and projection its abnegations and renunciations. This hidden agenda of yearning and gratification of the flesh is bound to be represented by images, by the feeling of nostalgia, and finally by rebellion. This rebellion, at the deepest level, is the existential revolutionary's field of inquiry. He is pursuing the I, or rather the structure of the I and its relation to being. Being is comprised of energy in a certain structure called the I. The ideals, projections, and sublimations, and atavisms acted out by literary models are the residue of past choices and abnegations. The energy of the it, id, the structure of the I, and their always shifting interrelationship, this is the stuff of being. The contrariety between the body and its memories, both real and regretted, produces a series of images from which the I selects its memories. The memory is the chiringa, unalterable, sanctified history. Looked at in this way, the neurosis is indeed a sacred idiosyncratic religion not to be given up on pain of damnation. It is to this grieving body with its diluted history that the 20th century helpers come to make an onslaught on nostalgia, to rescue personhood from personality, to replace hiddenness with standing open and being able to stand it, to use some of Heidegger's terms that are for once clear. This is the new Latin of the existential diagnosis. Thus, soul help means body help in the most generous sense of the term. And the literary physician strives after that seamless web of meaning of the non-literate aborigine, for whom anything not of the here and now is called in the dreaming. The I stands on the ruins of its choices. The I's choices are chosen from available options. These options are the upshot of environment, biology, and the nature of the world. This agenda can lead but to alienation of the it and the I if the vital current is broken or no chiringa is available. The anodyne for alienation has been, in recent cultures, ratiocination and romanticism, the negative and the positive faces of nostalgia. Nietzsche marked the end of these placebos. It was they, not God, that he canceled. We love and die now within biology and history, the very style of our existence produced by the holy war between these two inexorable forces. Neither God nor reason may mediate from outside. The dictionary and the Bible are vacated mythologies. To live in a post-atheistic as well as a post-Christian period is to nurture continual anxiety. The idea of reason or of God must now be freshly invented by Camus and the others. As Buber or Kazantzakis might put it, it is they, reason and God, who need us. Moravia's protagonists, then, are really graduations of the I, the anomalous flesh caught in its Procrustean tautology. The more one feels life calling in the sorties of the soma, the more audacious must the project, the engagement, become, lest, under the unremitting pressures of finitude, one fall prey to memory, to nostos, to that hated hope from which the Greeks ran. If existentialism agrees on anything, and it does, it is that man, as we thought we knew him, has disappeared. It is man that makes a whole in reality when his traditional values and identity have been abrogated. When moral man disappears or is wiped out by great events, then the atavist surviving projects his sense of nothingness onto reality and claims that it has vanished or become a hopeless jumble of meaninglessness. This mass for our century is given its most downright version by the author of that doomsday book of the everyday, Being and Nothingness. Freedom in its foundation coincides with the nothingness which is at the heart of man. Human reality is free because it is not enough. It is free because it is perpetually wrenched away from itself and because it has been separated by a nothingness from what it is and from what it will be. Man is free because he is not himself but presence to himself. The being which is what it is cannot be free. Freedom is precisely the nothingness which is made to be at the heart of man and which forces human reality to make itself instead of to be. Freedom is not a being, it's the being of man, i.e., his nothingness of being. This is the obligatory and most spectacular of all deductions. Man is wholly and forever free. Camus sees an absurd world where even the moles dare to hope. The wound in the idea of the conscience and of the world caused by the death of the idea of God has been suppurating now for 3 generations. An ominous new euphemism, behavior modification, provides a fascinating example of how the super-industrial state, operating on the worldview of the last century, attempts to manipulate the mind-brain, exclusive of the body and the environment, in order to socialize modern-day Americans. Inspired perhaps by the Pentagon Papers, someone in the bureaucracy of the federal government has smuggled out a Xeroxed nightmare. A 92-page monograph, whose official title is Development and Legal Regulation of Coercive Behavior Modification Techniques with Offenders, which is out of stock, according to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, which financed its preparation. The HEU thesis is that social or cultural or finally political rehabilitation begins inside the nervous system of the citizen. A miniaturized radio transmitter implanted inside the brain or body can monitor and transmit the conversations, locations, even the sexual responses of the subject 24 hours a day. The report explains that sewed up inside the subject's body along with the transponder would be a radio-controlled electric shock device. This device could deliver punishment to the offender anywhere in the world. Who are the offenders or subjects? The author of the monograph, Professor Ralph K. Schwitzgebel of Harvard University, dwells on homosexuals, but later in the monograph he talks about an offender's financial matters and disputes over financial outcomes.
F1 in the comments, F1 in the comments. I just don't want to be banned for anything. Like I said, this is a part of the book and we just listening to the book. This is only for educational purposes only. So just do me a favor. Always keep the F1s locked and loaded. TikTok is on a very strict guidelines right now. And I just want to be able to continue to bring this book to you guys.
And ominously, socially troublesome persons. The paper predicts that micro-miniaturization will permit near-permanent intracranial stimulation. Since the new program would relate to civil rather than criminal situations, we are assured that the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution would not present any serious obstacle to implementation of the plan. A euphemism for castration, sterilization, is given as an example of a technique that is more likely to be upheld as a court statute when it appears to be civil rather than criminal in nature. A National Security Agency computer specialist has proposed attaching miniature electronic tracking devices to 20 million Americans. The transponder would transmit the wearer's locations by radio to a computer and could be used for arrests following riots or confrontations and for monitoring aliens and political subgroups. Such devices seem to be the bitter fruits of a rapidly developing field, referred to euphemistically by its adherents as behavioral engineering. Its chief apostle, Dr. Robert Schwitzgebel, twin brother of Ralph, is urging the government to consider increased use of devices designed to control group behavior, noting that the government already spends much of its budget on prisons, police, judges, and so forth, social control hardware. Schwitzgebel proposes shifting just a small portion of the defense budget away from the development of weaponry to devices for measuring and positively reinforcing desirable behaviors of large groups. The government could easily accomplish this, he added, because 80% of the manufacturing assets in the United States is controlled by about 2,000 of the largest corporations. Barton L. Ingraham of Berkeley School of Criminology suggests that further control could be achieved through recent developments in electrophysiology. Not only might complete and continuous surveillance of a person who had demonstrated criminal tendencies be possible, but automatic deterrence or blocking of the criminal activity by electronic stimulation of the brain prior to commission of the act is also feasible.
Really quick, everybody on TikTok, don't forget to go follow me on YouTube. Same name, AfroTaino88. We are live on YouTube and TikTok. So that way, if you want to be able to catch up on the prior chapters or maybe look at some of the other books, I just started keeping track and doing this archive so people can go back and listen to them on their spare time. So if you guys could do me a favor, when you get a chance or a second, if you want to switch over and just go hit subscribe and come right back or stay over there, either or, just do me a favor, tap that screen, share this live. We got 8 minutes left of this chapter. Let's keep it going. We got a total of 1 hour and 49 minutes. We'll probably do another 49 minutes today, and then tomorrow we'll probably finish out the last hour.
Electrical impulses injected into the brain can induce, inhibit, or modify such phenomena as movement, desire, rage, aggression, fear, pain, and pleasure. At the Yale School of Medicine, Dr. Jose Delgado has implanted radio transceivers into the heads of his experimental animal subjects so that he can monitor and control their activities and emotions from a distant location. Computers have already been tested on subjects in mental hospitals. The machines are programmed for undesirable behavior and send out inhibitory instructions. In physical control of the mind, Delgado, whose work is also funded in part by the government, predicted that ESB, electronic stimulation of the brain, could become a master control of human behavior by means of man-made plans and instruments. Although maintaining law and order through brain control would require a government with virtually total power, Ingraham sees several things in its favor. 1, it would be completely effective. 2, it would obviate the need for massive changes in the social system. And 3, it would be relatively cheap. Thus, it falls out that the oral modalities and psychotherapy are for those that can afford to talk to a counselor, whereas the poor enjoy chemotherapy, shock therapy, and psychosurgery. And in California, Dr. William W. Herman, a counterinsurgency specialist for SDC, the System Development Corporation, told the Los Angeles Times that a good computer intelligence system would separate out the activists bent on destroying the system, and then develop a master plan to win the hearts and minds of the people. The unstated motive of this domestic counter-revolution is nothing less than control of bodies, and the techniques are extrapolated worldwide wherever tyranny and the American empire hold sway. From the study of these poor souls, the old word for mind, brain, body, in the American laboratory, one reckons back to the beginning, to Darwin and his evolutionary voyage. While going one day on shore near Wollaston Island, we pulled alongside a canoe with 6 Fuegians. These were the most abject and miserable creatures I anywhere beheld. On the east coast, the natives, as we have seen, have guanaco cloaks, and on the west they possess seal skins. Amongst these central tribes, the men generally have an otter skin, or some small scrap about as large as a pocket handkerchief, which is barely sufficient to cover their backs as low down as their loins. It is laced across the breast by strings, and according as the wind blows, it is shifted from side to side. But these Fuegians in the canoe were quite naked, and even one full-grown woman was absolutely so. It was raining heavily, and the fresh water, together with the spray, trickled down her body. In another harbor, not far distant, a woman who was suckling a recently born child came one day alongside the vessel, and remained there out of mere curiosity, whilst the sleet fell and thawed on her naked bosom, and on the skin of her naked baby. These poor wretches were stunted in their growth, their hideous faces bedaubed with white paint, their skins filthy and greasy, their hair entangled, their voices discordant, and their gestures violent. Viewing such men, one can hardly make oneself believe that they are fellow creatures and inhabitants of the same world. It is a common subject of conjecture what pleasure in life some of the lower animals can enjoy. How much more reasonably the same question may be asked with respect to those barbarians. At night, 5 or 6 human beings, naked and scarcely protected from the wind and rain of this tempestuous climate, sleep on the wet ground coiled up like animals. Whenever it is low water, winter or summer, night or day, they must rise to pick shellfish from the rocks, and the women either dive to collect sea eggs, or sit patiently in their canoes and, with a baited hairline without any hook, jerk out little fish. If a seal is killed, or the floating carcass of a putrid whale discovered, it is a feast, and such miserable food is assisted by a few tasteless berries and fungi. Here we may see clearly the subjective misunderstanding of objective phenomenon at the very origin of the modern method: complete ethnocentrism, class blindness, and the seeds of modern enlightened colonization and enslavement. It is these same half-humans who will have revolutionized the entire human agenda by the middle of the 20th century. This 4/5 of humankind will rise up in their ghettos, from east to west, to announce their humanity in the name of the wretched of the earth. It is, then, the task of dialectical materialism to invoke the entire human body in a complete social historical context, wherever the concepts mind or brain are brought to play in the dialogue of alienation that modern science has become. Our field is real life, where each arbitrary order of abstraction, mind, brain, body, is always a function of human flesh and blood. And the sum of these abstractions is the soul. And that the soul and the ego may be congruous when the ego, the I, and the race are perceived as functions of each other always and everywhere. Thus, dialectical materialism presses always toward a structuralism of dynamic process. In order to take increased responsibility for directing our own biology, consciousness must be improved steadily, diligently applied to understanding the world and controlling ourselves, but resolutely prevented from interfering with activity properly left to automatic behavior. In order to prevent ourselves from being enslaved by a minority, the majority of us must vigorously insist that new controls of mind not be applied by the few without the prior conscious consent of the many, both as to technique and objective. If we follow the human agenda methodically, it is conceivable that much will become known about areas that today are totally obscured by bias, such as the possibility of extrasensory perception, survival of the personality after death, and so on. Perhaps long after we have departed, the gradual accumulation of information will shed some light on where and how we went. Personally, I would be delighted with a world in which resources were diverted from projects to tyrannize, sell, or annihilate minds onto others designed to prove they can surmount distance or survive the grave. That is, provided all minds were permitted and helped to live freely and fully in the interim. As we cross the threshold from the past era of scarcity to the future era of abundance, the mind is learning the controls required to remain zestfully engaged with life throughout increased longevity devoid of drudgery and poverty. It must also learn to generate a new sort of man, capable of preserving, amplifying, and passing to our human or post-human followers the striving for mastery of reality, while preserving its elements of intellect, character, freedom, and joy. Especially joy, for we are entering some of the most joyous of all the moments of man. The mind is flesh.
That was a deep chapter. We're gonna do one more chapter. I think the next chapter is very short. It's like 12 minutes. We do got an hour and 41 minutes, but the chapter after that is another hour. So I don't want to do the hour and then have to do the 30 minutes tomorrow. And I got to do a couple of things tonight. So let's get through this next chapter. It's a couple of minutes. So just tap that screen, share this live. I appreciate all the love and support. And as y'all can hear, my dog is barking at me. So I think he want to go out.
Affirmative action in theory and practice. Letters on the Baki case, September 22nd, 1977.
I'm already interested.
The following letters were sent to Nathaniel S. Coley of the NAACP and to William Koblenz of the Board of Regents of the University of California on the topic of Alan Baki, a white medical student who charged that affirmative action preferences people of color and is therefore unconstitutional. To Mr. Nathaniel S. Coley, Esquire, Western Regional Council, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Dear Mr. Coley, what will a Supreme Court dominated by the racist appointees of an imperial madman decide regarding its previous decision on Baki?
We got 12 minutes of this chapter. Let's try to end the live with a bang. Let's try to get up to 15K, everyone. Let's tap that screen, share this live, and let's see what happens. We got 12 minutes. Let's keep it going.
The answer is rhetorical. The real questions are whether form is more important than content. Does a change in strategy negate a principle? How long will we allow ourselves to play their cruel and usual game? It is obvious to those with eyes that our people, black people, have suffered, to this day from the first day of chattel slavery in this country, the most outrageous forms of barbarity set upon any single group of people in known history. It is evident that blacks in the United States have been denied, even to this day, by a white-dominated society, the most fundamental of human rights. The question of having to reverse a mere trend is piteous in the face of turning over an entire institution of racism. We must look to win. Do we want to win an argument on the rightness of our plea, or do we want to win the issue? We are right, but right in this country has usually spelled white. We deserve by decree our 40 acres and 2 mules, but do we have them? We deserve a decent education, and since 1954, have there been any serious changes toward that? We must win any way we can, by any means necessary, pursuing a variety of courses. The Baki question is not complex. The answers are, will we ask murderers not to kill? Will we ask racists to deny racism? Will we ask a Supreme Court that has outraged the civilized world with its many anti-human decisions to become humane, understanding? I urge, indeed beg you, my sisters and brothers, to reconsider our posture in the Baki case. If the Supreme Court decides on the issue as presented, it will surely find the victim guilty. It will set a nearly irreversible precedent to our disinterest. It will say with the rhetoric of democratic racism that to allow minority quotas in schools is a form of reverse racism. This tragic turnabout will destroy within a few years all programs of affirmative action in this country and devastate our little achievements toward full citizenship.
Really quick, he wrote this September 22nd, 1977. Just think about that. He wrote this September 22nd, 1977. Just threw it out there.
Enclosed is my letter to the University of California Board of Regents. As the letter indicates, only 1 in 5 whites even applied to the Davis program. If the program were applied as generally written, it is probable that only a few of them would have been admitted, perhaps not even Bakke himself. If a few whites had categorically fallen into the program, albeit. Better those few than what the Supreme Court can ultimately do, eliminate all or most blacks. With the removal of one concept, the race concept, from the program's language, we will have our program. It will still be dominated by blacks. Who else is more economically and educationally disadvantaged? My letter to the Board of Regents is a desperate attempt to force the University of California to stop playing its game of saccharine sensitivity and let our people go to school. Consider this position, please.
Listen.
Consider the withdrawal of the question before the Supreme Court on this basis, lest the inevitable answer make folly of our pathetic lot. I humbly request your response. All power to the people. Huey P. Newton, President, Black Panther Party. To Mr. William Koblenz, Chairman, the Board of Regents of the University of California. Dear Mr. Koblenz, I write to urge immediate consideration by the University of California toward administering the special admissions program at the Medical School of the Davis campus in a manner consistent with the program's stated purposes and thereby, hopefully, avoiding an opinion in the Bakke case now pending before the Supreme Court. I make this request after thoroughly reviewing the opinion of the California Supreme Court and the briefs filed with the United States Supreme Court, as well as after talking with many people concerned about the implications of a ruling either way in the Bakke case. It is my conclusion, for reasons I will explain, that the issue posed by the Bakke case, that is, the constitutionality of preferential racial quotas, is unnecessary and bitterly divisive to the university and the country at this time. The twofold purpose of the special admissions program at the Davis Medical School is, according to the university, 1, to equalize the opportunity for educationally or economically disadvantaged students to obtain a medical education, and 2, to increase the number of doctors who will practice in medically underserved areas. The first goal can be achieved without regard to race, even though a disproportionate number of educationally or economically disadvantaged applicants for medical school are likely to be non-white racial minorities. But it is beyond dispute that poor whites, whether they be migrant farm workers, urban welfare beneficiaries, or Appalachian residents, fit within the category of educationally or economically disadvantaged. In fact, of the total number of students...
You know what? Even too with the comments right now, they put in Linda McMahon in charge of the education department. And when I hear that, I don't know, like the Daughters of the Confederacy just come to mind, right? Like I don't know. I feel like she's the new face of that, even though I don't know her policies yet on the educational system. But just thinking about her, where she comes from, who her husband is, who put her in that position. Yo, it's like we're reliving the Daughters of the Confederacy all over again. That's my opinion. I might be overstretching if some people may think that, but that's my opinion.
For the special admissions program at Davis, 1 in 5 was white. Although since 1969, none but racial minorities, unfortunately, were admitted. Indeed, the university did not even challenge the trial court's finding that applicants who are not members of a minority are barred from participation in the special admissions program. Bakke versus Regents of the University of California, Volume 18, California Reports, 3rd Series, pages 34, 44, 1976. Thus, the practical application of the special admissions program fails to meet its own theoretical standard of assisting educationally or economically disadvantaged students. Instead, it has obviously only focused on those disadvantaged who also happen to be minority. I believe this is a prime example of a program that, at least in terms of the lofty stated purpose of assisting the disadvantaged, is constitutional on its face, but not as applied. Accordingly, I suggest that if the university has not already done so, it immediately administer the special admissions program consistent with its first stated goal and, without regard to race, inform the court of this fact and urge it to dismiss the case as moot. This will avoid a ruling that is not only factually unnecessary, but puts in political and financial jeopardy numerous programs intended to benefit economically and educationally disadvantaged persons. With respect to the second stated goal of the special admissions program, that is, increasing the number of doctors who will practice in medically underserved areas, the university can and ought to go further than it has to achieve this aim. Only if we assume that educationally or economically disadvantaged persons will practice in underserved areas upon graduation will this goal be achieved. They might, and then again they might not, desire to return to the poverty they can leave behind them after acquiring a medical education. To assure that the present imbalance of physicians throughout California is redressed, I propose that additional points or credits be given to applicants for medical school who will agree to practice in medically underserved areas for a specific period of time upon graduation. This principle is already well established and accepted by the public in similar situations. The military academies and even ROTC, at least the Navy, conditioned the public subsidy of a college education upon later military service. Medical education is the most heavily subsidized of all educations, and it does not seem too oppressive to condition its receipt from those who opt for extra credit toward admissions upon their later service for pay in an underserved area. I recognize, of course, that this may raise yet another constitutional issue, the right of a public university to attach such a condition to admission. But I suggest this is politically a far healthier issue to litigate and publicly debate, and at least ought to be put to the test before we reach the divisive one of racial quotas. The entire debate now raging over Baki and the constitutionality of so-called benign racial classifications reminds me of a story told about my namesake, Huey P. Long. This story was told to me many times by my father, who was from Louisiana, but was also recounted by A.J. Liebling in The Earl of Louisiana. During one of his campaigns for re-election as governor, Huey was approached by a group of blacks who were concerned about the massive depression unemployment suffered by the black population of the state. They asked him to do something to relieve their plight. He told them he would, but warned them they might not like the way he went about it. Thereupon, Huey began campaign stumping around the state, complaining to audiences that he had been shocked to see black orderlies handling white women patients in some of the state's hospitals. He called for separate hospitals for blacks and, after getting re-elected, embarked upon an ambitious and popularly supported construction program for black hospitals, which produced a substantial number of jobs for blacks. Judging by the results, Huey's program was partly benign, an example of color consciousness. But judging by the rhetoric employed, or the means used, it was racist. Only history can judge whether, on balance, this effort of Huey P. Long's to relieve black employment was more positive than negative. History, and not the court, ought to also judge the value of the special admissions program at the Davis Medical School, especially since its purpose is not dependent upon a racial classification. I have rarely been accused of shirking debate, especially since I believe in the necessity and inevitability of contradiction. See, for example, E. H. Erickson and H. P. Newton in Search of Common Ground, 1973. But the Baki case does not represent a true or necessary contradiction. It is a contrived one that can and should be avoided in the public interest. I am keenly aware of your personal commitment to public education and equal justice. Therefore, I am hopeful that you will give these thoughts your immediate attention, share them with the appropriate authorities, and inform the court of the suggested change in the administration of the special admissions program at Davis that renders Baki moot. Respectfully, Huey P. Newton.
So really quick. So there's the next chapter. It is an hour. It's about 59 minutes. It's response of the government to the Black Panther Party, 1980. After that, it has the forward by I believe that's his son, and then the introduction by David Hilliard, which I don't understand why the introduction's at the end. The introduction's 30 minutes. So I think I'm actually gonna just skip the forward and the introduction because it's gonna give y'all majority of the book. But y'all guys throw in a 1 in the comment section if y'all just want to listen to the last chapter, so that way we can knock it out and just be done with the book. Because I've been doing this book for a while now, and I know due to my schedule and a bunch of things, we've been doing this and dragging it out. Put a 1 in the comments if you guys want me to continue it. If not, we could pick up mañana and do the last hour. But throw a 1 in the comments. Let me know. There's 10 people in here. I need 6 ones in the comments to do the last chapter. So let me know. Let me know. Now, let me stop. Give a couple of minutes. I got 1. Let me see. I got 1 in the comment. And it's all good. Like I said, I know it's a little difficult sometimes to listen to the books for extensive amount of time. I'm just throwing a suggestion out there just so we can get it out of there. But how you got a 0.5? That don't even count. That's not even a full decision. The whole, you know, right? You know what? Listen. Now it's 99. Now what? Oh, man, that have a little. Even with the, listen, if I take the point, we almost there, right? We got take the 0.5 plus the 99, you got 1.4. So I think that's valid, but that means only 2. I got 2.1, 2.4, whatever it is. Look, I can't even do math today. But you know what? Listen, we're going to save it for tomorrow where I got a little bit more energy and you guys got a little bit more energy because I feel like y'all guys is quiet today. It's quiet. Yeah, that was Puerto Rican math. Absolutely. But you know what? I want to end it out with 2 songs. Well, 1 song by my brother Manny. Let's get this started. Go back because I started it off with it, and I definitely want to end it off with it because it was fire. But let's get it going. Tap that screen.
I'm a Puerto Rican from the diaspora. I want to see my island free, not now, but I order. My name rings bells from here to Yabacoa. I'm from Cleveland where it gets colder than Minnesota. This ain't no novella, my life is like a movie. I'm a revolutionary like my brother Subi. Do this for la patria, race against la máquina. Guns sound like reggaeton, the way it be like rakata. It's Maniche, I'm here to stay. When it comes to my people, I don't play. From day to night, night to day. It's in my veins, I got the blood of a slave. We freedom fighting all the way to the grave. I'm a young lord, Balante is a slogan. Even a blind man can see that I am chosen. You can hate, but you will never ever stop my motion.
Tap that screen, tap that screen, tap that screen. Let's get it up, let's tap that screen. Let's get it, let's get it.
They say we come from garbage, that's the farthest from the truth. They don't have no clue, Tony Hicklin, fuck you. Fuck you too if you believe that dumb shit. God sent me here to put the matrix in a glitch. Standing on the mound, I ain't giving up no hits. Leader of my team, no hitters when I pitch. And when I'm up the bat, guarantee I will not miss. Like number 21, I was born for this shit.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody tapping in. I appreciate everybody tapping in today. I know I started off a little bit off balance. I came on way later than what I normally come on, but I appreciate everybody who tapping in, who tapped in.
Free Puerto Rock, that shit'll never stop. Screaming free Puerto Rock, till my casket drop. The revolution now, you either ready or you not. I'm running to the front lines, I wanna pick my spot. I wanna stand for something, I don't wanna sit and watch. It's time to free our people from these chains and these locks. It's time to free our minds and stop thinking in a box. You with us or against us if you not. Relax.
And you know what, guys? I'm going to end it right there. You guys have a positive and productive evening. Don't forget, go over to YouTube and subscribe to the AfroTaino 88 channel on YouTube. I appreciate all the love and support. For those on TikTok, just check it out. We are live on YouTube as well. You can catch us the same time we on live on TikTok. You will catch us live on YouTube. If you ever want to go catch some of the episodes or some of the books that we've previously listened to, just do me a favor. Go over to YouTube, check out AfroTaino 88, and just go to the live sections, and you can listen to some of the previous books. I started recording them, the last book, which was War Against All Puerto Ricans, and then we did the Huey P. Newton Reader. This book has been dragging out because of my trips and everything and the stuff that I've been having going on with the organization and personal life. So tomorrow is the last final hour, so we will be listening to it and knocking this book right out of the park. Salute to everybody tapping in, who tapped in, who continues to tap in, all the love and support. I really appreciate y'all, for real, for real. Go check out the link in the bio, guys. I'm really need a little bit of help with the GoFundMe for the publishing company I'm trying to put out. I got a project that I've been working on that's fully done, you know, to be able to put this book out for the children. But go check out my couple of videos. Go tap in. I'm going to see you guys later because I got shit to do, and I'm pretty sure you do too. Peace.